When my father told me to sit down, the whole room obeyed before I did. 200 uniforms stared while his voice cut through me like steel. "You're not in command here, Lauren. You're nobody." Laughter rippled across the table. I stood frozen, the weight of his words heavier than the medals on his chest. I'd been called stubborn, emotional, too ambitious, but nobody was different. Nobody meant I didn't exist. What he didn't know was that the moment he said it, I stopped being his daughter and became something else entirely. The kind of ghost even generals can't control. Monday morning hung heavy over Peterson Base, the kind of cold that seeps through fabric and bone. The air inside the briefing room was sharper still, metallic, spotless, merciless. Rows of uniforms lined the long table, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead under the glare of white fluorescent lights. At the far end stood my father, the general, steady as stone, voice carved by decades of command. I waited for his nod before presenting my plan. An orbital relay from Strike-Link satellites to cut response time for rescue ops in the Syrian corridor. I'd spent nights refining it, running simulations until dawn, but I should have known better. His interruption landed like a strike. His tone was calm, rehearsed, weaponized for humiliation. Laughter rippled through the ranks. My pulse tightened, every breath a countdown. I gripped my pen until it snapped in my hand. No one noticed. They were too busy watching how small I could make myself. I took my seat, opened my folder, and pretended that my hands weren't shaking beneath the table. Then came the sound of polished boots outside. The door opened. Colonel Lucas Grant, SEAL commander, entered with the quiet confidence of someone who's seen more war than talk. He greeted my father, but kept his gaze on me for half a second longer than protocol allowed. My father introduced him with a smirk about my suggestions. The room chuckled again. I smiled faintly, gathered my files, and stood to leave before the silence swallowed me whole. Outside, the Colorado wind cut clean through my uniform. 16 years of swallowing pride, of sitting when told. It all came rushing back. That morning, I realized something had finally broken. He told me to sit down. I was already on my way up. I grew up in a house where silence had a weight to it. In Alexandria, the air always seemed heavy with expectation. Too many medals on the walls. Too many rules between breaths. My father believed fear kept people sharp. He wore it like armor and handed it out like orders. My mother, Claire, loved me quietly, the way someone loves a secret they aren't supposed to keep. Her words were always gentle, always wrapped in warning. Don't contradict him. Don't make a scene. Don't disappoint him. So, I learned early that silence could be survival. I swallowed my words until they sat like stones in my chest. When he yelled, I didn't flinch. When he mocked, I smiled small. Around guests, I was kiddo. When we were alone, I was liability. I still remember that Christmas dinner when I told him I'd been accepted into the Air Force Academy. He froze, knife still in his hand, eyes sharp enough to cut through me. You? You'll last a week. I smiled, though my pulse hammered in my throat. Then I'll make it the longest week you've seen. For a moment, just one. His expression faltered. And that was the last time he looked at me as anything close to equal. I left Virginia the next spring with one suitcase and a private vow. Never again would I ask for his permission to exist. Years later, I'd understand that my silence was never weakness. It was training. Every unspoken word became discipline. Every swallowed reaction, control. The quiet he forced on me would one day become the weapon that saved an entire SEAL unit in a desert halfway across the world. After that morning at the base, the corridors emptied fast, leaving only the hum of heaters and the smell of burnt coffee. Snow fell thick outside, muting the sound of jets taking off from the runway. I sat at my desk, fingers poised above a blank resignation form, ready to walk away. Then my screen flickered. A coded email appeared out of nowhere. Subject line, Ghost 13, standby. Extraction at 0400. I read it twice before it sank in. Ghost 13 was me. The Pentagon had its hidden divisions, programs so deep they didn't exist on paper. Ghost Division was one of them. We handled the missions that couldn't reach daylight. For 7 years, I'd lived 2 lives. A dull analyst by day, a tactical ghost by night, guiding drone strikes and rescue ops no one would ever know happened. I packed quickly, no trace left behind. Deleted my logs. wiped my hard drive, tucked my real insignia beneath the lining of my jacket. Outside, the night bit hard at my skin. At exactly 0400, a black SUV without plates rolled to a stop by the service gate. The driver lowered the window, his voice low and even. "Welcome back, Ghost." We drove in silence to awaiting transport. As the jet lifted off the tarmac, Colorado's lights dissolved beneath us, swallowed by the dark. I stared down at the Atlantic until it vanished under cloud, thinking of that conference room, his voice cutting through my name like it was disposable. He'd been right about one thing. In his world, I was nobody. But in this one, I was the call they made when everything else had failed. Sand swallowed my boots as I stepped off the transport near the Iraq-Syria border. The air here had a different gravity, dense with metal, gunpowder, and heat. The rotor blades of a Black Hawk churned the air above us, scattering grit across the landing strip. Colonel Lucas Grant approached, his voice even beneath the noise. "Welcome back, Ghost." I nodded once. Out here, I wasn't anyone's daughter. I wasn't a reminder of a general's disappointment. I was Ghost 13, Tactical Command for Drone Reconnaissance and Ground Fire Coordination. By the third night, our team was running on caffeine and adrenaline. The operation, Retrieve Black, was simple on paper. Recover a stolen satellite drive from a rogue militia before it crossed the border. Simple rarely survived contact with the field. My drone feed painted the desert in infrared, a burning landscape of movement and heat. When the uplink stabilized, a fragment of code flashed across the control screen. RM Command DC. The letters hit harder than the heat. RM Raymond McCoy. For a full minute, I forgot to breathe. Either he'd been compromised, or he was complicit. Both possibilities burned the same. Incoming fire snapped me back. The SEALs were pinned between two ridges. I rerouted the drone, launched precision strikes, 3 flashes, 3 plumes of smoke. Static filled my headset. Then Grant's voice came through. "That's why we call you Ghost." "Copy that," I replied, though my hand was clenched tight around the receiver. The transmission logs were already relaying to Washington. He would see the report, trace the origin, recognize the signature embedded in the data. I just saved the lives of men my father commanded to protect, using a program he never believed I belonged to. That night, inside the command container, I replayed the footage, eyes fixed on the code string. RM Command DC. The hum of the generator blurred into wind, carrying the taste of red dust. His words from that briefing echoed in my skull, rhythmic as my pulse. "You're nobody." But soon, the nobody he'd dismissed would be the most dangerous ghost he'd ever made. 3 days later, we flew back stateside. The moment we landed, the headlines were already waiting. General Raymond McCoy under internal investigation for security breach. The news felt like static under my skin. I didn't need to guess his reaction. My phone vibrated before I even reached debrief. "If you're involved in this, you're dead to me." I deleted the message. In his eyes, I'd never truly been alive. At Ghost Division's secure site, the conference room lights hummed above the metal table. Grant sat across from me, the security chief beside him, eyes sharp but tired. "We traced the breach," Grant said quietly. "It's not your father. It's someone inside his office, Colonel Haskins." The name landed like a bitter memory. Haskins had been my father's shadow for a decade, the same man who once barked at me to fetch coffee during a Pentagon briefing. If I exposed the proof, my father's career would collapse with him for negligence. If I kept it buried, his reputation would rot under suspicion. Either choice cut through me the same way he'd once cut through my pride. That night, I sat alone in my quarters. On the desk, an old photo of us in uniform, edges curled, and a small drive containing every encrypted file linking Haskins to the sale. One was memory. One was justice. I touched both, and chose the third thing he never taught me to value. Truth. I transmitted the files with a single tag. Anonymous clearance. No trace. No credit. No glory. The ghost strikes once and vanishes. By morning, every major outlet ran the same headline. Anonymous whistleblower exposes mole inside General McCoy's office. His name was cleared. His command survived. But when I passed him in the Pentagon corridor later that week, the air between us froze. His uniform immaculate, his eyes glacial. "Don't ever interfere with my command again," he said low enough for only me to hear. I met his gaze and answered softly, steady as the desert wind. I never did. Then I walked past him, carrying with me the faint smell of sand and gunpowder, the scent of someone who had just dragged his honor out of the dirt and left it shining behind. I'd faced gunfire, but nothing like the sharp, suffocating air of my father's gala. 40 years of his service, wrapped in chandeliers and champagne. Senators and contractors filled the ballroom, clinking glasses over careers built on other people's silence. Earlier, he'd called, "No uniform, Lauren. It's not that kind of night. Wear something pretty." So I wore navy silk, the color of the uniform he never wanted me to be seen in. At the entrance, my mother took my hand. "He's proud of you," she whispered. "He just doesn't know how to say it." "Mom!" "He doesn't speak that language." Inside, the lights made the metals gleam cold. My father smiled for cameras, shaking hands like a man collecting loyalty. When he spotted me, he raised his glass. "Gentlemen, my daughter, the analyst from Colorado, still learning how the real military works." The laughter that followed was polite, practiced. I smiled back, but the lace beneath my dress carried a secret, a hidden mic feeding directly to my phone. As I moved through the crowd, the buzz of conversation blurred, until I caught a voice I knew too well. Colonel Haskins, my father's aide, murmured to a man in a red tie. "The Saudis have the satellite files. Payment confirmed. Keep the general out of this." My pulse quickened. I passed by, setting my glass down near them, enough to record every word. By the time the orchestra began its closing piece, the evidence was mine. When my father called me over for one last photo, his hand tightened on my shoulder. "Stay close," he said. "You make me look grounded." "That's ironic," I answered softly. I left before the applause faded, sending the recording to Ghost Division. "Evidence secured. Do not trace source." Moments later, a coded reply blinked across my screen. "Ghost, stay put. We'll handle it." Then another. "Potential breach. They know." The city lights blurred through the windshield as I drove. The radio called him a symbol of honor. I turned it off. For the first time, I realized the war wasn't in the shadows anymore. It was already here, and I was standing in its center. The door blew open at 3 a.m. 3 men stormed in, weapons drawn. "Ghost 13, you're under arrest for transmitting classified files." I didn't resist. I just said quietly, "I didn't send lies. I delivered the truth." Grant was waiting when they dragged me in. "They're using your clearance logs," he said. "It came from your IP." Haskins had cloned my credentials, turning me into the traitor of my own mission. In the interrogation room, my father appeared. His voice was steady, colder than I remembered. "Do you know what you've done to my name? I saved it. Don't twist this. I don't have to. Haskins already did." He slammed the table, shaking the metal. "You think you're a soldier? You're a hacker hiding behind a screen. Better than hiding behind metals." He left without looking back. Outside, I heard his voice. "Find Ghost 13. Detain if necessary. Use lethal force?" someone asked. "If you must." He didn't know the ghost he wanted dead was his own daughter. Grant helped me escape through a side tunnel, the night thick with sirens. As we reached the old munitions yard, the radio echoed. "Ghost 13 is armed and dangerous. Approach with caution. You still want to clear his name?" Grant asked. "No," I said, watching snow start to fall. "I just want to end the war." At the safe house, I uploaded the real evidence. The screen read, "Evidence uploading. Target, Pentagon oversight." Sirens wailed closer. I looked at Grant and smiled faintly. Let them come. Ghosts don't die. I stopped running. That morning, I walked back into Peterson Base, the same sterile room where everything had begun. They called it an internal review. It felt more like a tribunal carved from pride and politics. The flag behind the podium hung too still, the air too clean. My father sat at the head of the table, posture sharp, collar drawn so tight it looked like it was choking him. His metals gleamed, but his eyes had turned to steel. I took the seat opposite him, wrists still cuffed. He opened the folder in front of him and tossed it across the table. "We have proof Ghost 13 accessed the Pentagon network through your terminal. You betrayed your uniform." I said nothing. He slammed his fist once. "Say something. You still don't see it, do you?" I met his stare, steady and unflinching. The rear door opened. Colonel Grant stepped inside, voice cutting through the tension. "General, Ghost 13 is one of ours. She saved 12 of my men in Syria. Silence detonated through the room. Every pair of eyes swung to me. I rose, breath even. Status and identifier, Ghost, 13. Clearance level 5, Omega Protocol. Chairs scraped the floor, papers hit the ground. I unclipped the cuffs, placed a small silver badge on the table. G13. Classified access. My father didn't move. For the first time in my life, he was speechless, crushed by the very authority he'd worshipped. I powered up the monitor and played the recording from the gala. Haskins' voice spilled out of the speakers, cold and unmistakable. The Saudis have the package. When it ended, Grant spoke quietly. Haskins was arrested this morning, all traced back to him. I turned toward my father. You signed an order to kill me. His voice cracked. I didn't know. You never do. He sat down hard, the sound of his chair echoing like a verdict. When I left the room, every officer in it stood, not because of rank, not because of fear, but because, for once, they recognized what integrity looked like. Sunlight poured through the glass corridor as I walked out. The reflection caught the silver on my shoulders, bright and sharp. I thought of the first order he ever gave me. Sit down, not today. A week later, I was back in Langley, inside Ghost Division's quiet halls. The investigation was closed. Haskins was convicted. My father escaped charges, but was forced into retirement for command negligence. That afternoon, a plain envelope arrived through military dispatch. No sender, only one line, for Ghost 13. Inside was a short letter, handwriting uneven, ink faded at the edges. Lauren, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I finally understand respect. You fought the war I was too proud to see. I hope you win it. Dad. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully into my flight jacket. No tears, no anger, just the stillness that comes when survival feels like enough. 2 months later, we met at a small cafe near the Colorado base. No uniform, no rank. Just 2 tired soldiers who had finally run out of things to fight over. He said quietly, You wear those wings better than I ever did. I answered, That's because I learned to fly without permission. The coffee cooled between us. No embrace, only peace, quiet, imperfect, real. That night, I drove along the runway. Wind roared past the windshield. The war was over, and silence was all that remained. 10 years later, Colorado felt softer somehow, still wild, but less hostile. The air at the Air Combat Training Academy shimmered with the heat rising off the runway. And the mountains in the distance looked closer than they used to, like time itself had shifted just enough to let the light in. I stood near the flight line, clipboard tucked under one arm, watching the cadets finish their drills. The rumble of engines and the sharp scent of jet fuel always steadied me. Maybe because it reminded me of everything I'd fought for, and everything I'd survived. One cadet, Emily Torres, lingered after the others left. She was young, stubborn, with the kind of defiance that still trembled at the edges. Her eyes were red when she spoke, voice small beneath the roar of distant aircraft. My dad says flying's not for girls. The words hit harder than I expected. I saw my younger self in her stance, the same quiet hurt, the same flicker of fire that refused to die out. I rested a hand on her shoulder, firm and calm. Your father may give you your name, Emily, but you're the one who decides how high it can fly. She blinked back tears, nodded, and jogged across the tarmac. Her jet came alive, a flash of sunlight bouncing off its wings as it lifted into the open sky. I watched it climb until it became nothing but a silver thread against the blue. The wind rose, brushing across my face, carrying a voice I hadn't heard in years. Sit down, McCoy. I smiled softly. Those words used to cage me. Now, they couldn't touch me, because the sky never learned how to kneel, and neither did I.